of reports we've gotten from the ground, some people voting, some not voting. The security situation in parts like Kibra, Mathare, in Nairobi, Mombasa, Kisumu, Siaya, and Migori, just to name a few, George. And you have constantly said that you think the police are using the wrong strategy in handling this political situation we find ourselves in. As an expert and as an analyst, from where you sit, what would have been the right strategy to handle this situation?
Akisa, it will all depend on the situation. What you need to do is to do a threat analysis. Once you've done a threat analysis, you will decide on what kind of strategy you need to use to deal with that situation. And as you've seen what happened in Migori, there was a leader, he was talking to his people, and he said, I've talked to the police and told the police, don't incite my people by lobbing tear gas at them, don't provoke them. And I think that is the way to go. And that's why I said, the phases, there are 5. Preparedness. Yeah? You must be proactive. Get intel. Plan with this intel. That is preparedness. And then come to what we call response. How do you respond to the situation? This is also supposed to be put on an operational paper, practiced by the police that you'll deploy on the ground. And after the response, you move to the recovery. Do we have that kind of strategy? It's difficult for people to vote in Migori just because people have barricaded the roads. What plans did the police have for this? Because it's not the first time we've seen this kind of thing happening in Migori, Nyanza, Western Coast, yeah, to be precise. And then, I mean, we should have learned from the previous experiences that we had and then sat down and came up with a proper plan. So what we thought was going to work for us was only tact. Send the police. Show of force. Send those water cannons. The people will see the cannons and fear. We are forgetting that right now, we are dealing with a radicalized population.
And then where does that put us? Because that was my next question. We are dealing with, especially in Nyanza,
yes,
the police are seemingly dealing with people who are not afraid of tear gas canisters, of the water cannons, or even the bullets.
That is my worry, Akisa, because I happened to listen to Honorable Raila's speech yesterday. He actually told the people, don't go out and demonstrate. Those were his instructions. But it seems this has taken a life of its own. The youth are now in control. He is not in control. They are doing what they feel is right. And right for them is going out there and making sure that there is no voting. And I mean, we are getting now into a dangerous situation. And if you look now, we are talking about a national resistance movement. We are not talking about a revolution, a revolutionary movement. We are talking about a resistance. And resistance comes in 2 ways. We can have lawful, yeah, and non-violence resistance. This is like what they talked about yesterday, economic sabotage, that kind of stuff. And then we can have what we call a violent resistance. And what we are witnessing now in parts of Nyanza, Western and Coast, is actually moving to that direction of violent resistance. And for a country, I think we should not go there. I'll take an example of Uganda. Uganda had the NRM, National Resistance Movement, and all of a sudden, there's another wing that appeared. They call it the National Resistance Army. Let's go to Southern Sudan. They had the SPLM, Sudanese People Liberational Movement. And from somewhere sprang out the Sudanese People Liberational Army. Are we looking at that kind of situation? Are we looking at that kind of scenario?
Okay.
And if we're headed there, what mitigations do we have in place? We just don't need to blanket this. We need to talk about it.
All right. All right. Let's go back to the field a bit before we get back to that to this conversation here. Our senior reporter, Patrick Amimo, is covering the county of Makueni for us. Currently, just on standby to have a conversation with the governor, Kivutha Kibwana. Amimo, a very good afternoon to you. I'll hand it over to you for that conversation there.
Good afternoon. I'm in Makueni County, where also we've witnessed low voter turnouts, and some polling centers could not open up for business today. So far this afternoon, we've seen that in most of these polling centers, some that did open up already, the voters were not trickling or maybe walking into the polling stations. So I think what is happening now is that most of the polling clerks and the returning officers are just relaxed, in a relaxed mood as they wait for the 5 o'clock o'clock to start maybe the vote counting process. But just joining me is the Makueni County Governor, Professor Kivutha Kibwana. Just, Professor, how has been exercise been in Makueni so far?
I think the people generally in Makueni decided that they were not going to, come and vote because Raila and the president said people have the right to vote or not to vote. So in Makueni, they decided that they were not going to vote. Unfortunately, some of the chiefs.
We apologize for that technical hitch that we have encountered there in that particular link. Our senior reporter, Patrick Amimo, there having a conversation with Professor Kivutha Kibwana. But as we try to make it right, let's get back to the conversation here. George Msamali, the security expert, has mentioned something about the national resistance movement that was declared yesterday, the Uhuru Park Declaration from yesterday, saying that we need to be very careful because it would be economic sabotage and might lead into a violent movement at some point, given the kind of pattern that has been established in other countries.
Yeah.
But looking at the economic sabotage that the NASA leader Raila Odinga called for yesterday,
Yeah.
how effective do you think this would be
Yeah.
to help address some of the concerns they've had about this country and the leadership?
Right. Because just before I answer that, I just wanted to bring into context the fact that there's been a lot of talk about, the elections are affecting the economy, and of course it has been blamed on one side, the NASA side.
Yeah.
But let's be clear, just before the electioneering period, the economy was already devastated. We were sitting on a $40 billion debt. We were sitting on lecturers were on strike because of no pay. Nurses were on strike because of no pay. Doctors the same, and of course we had the tea farmers and everybody. So the economy was already on its knees. And anybody coming to tell us that it was because of the electioneering period is just confirming one thing, that we don't have a viable economy in the system that we've been having. In America, they campaign for 2 years. 2 years, because there is the nominations that take almost like 8 months, and then the nominations come. The economy is always, it should be, always, stable, so that we don't have this kind of, deviations coming just because of, campaigning. Because why should that be? So having said that, yes, I think it is important to now go into the fact that if we are going to move forward, then for any economy, it is important that discussions or talks go between the political leaders. And security, like my colleague has put it here, is very paramount to economic development and security and peace. So those are things we should really now focus on as a country.
Do you think the national resistance movement would be effective?
So when we come to the national resistance movement, that is now where the focus will have to be made by the resistance movement. First, it wants to do what? It wants to establish or renew our democracy, which was going down. And you require that democracy or governance to be able to have an effective economic growth.
But there are people who feel that democracy hasn't gone down in the country.
I think it is wrong, because what is democracy? The three arms of government should be operating in such a way that each of them is independent. Now, when we know what we know right now is that the judiciary is under fire from the executive. The executive, even the police, who are represented by my colleague, the security arm of the executive, is actually acting under distress. They are probably doing certain things I'm very sure that they may not want to do from their training. So even the executive is not operating in a democratic way. Neither, of course, is the legislative assembly, because they are all under the so-called tyranny of numbers. So coming back to the national resistance movement, all movements are about economic empowerment of the people that feel they are resisting whatever is happening. And so by national resistance movement, now trying to focus on certain economic aspects of what they consider to be the tyrants, I mean, people who are creating that disparity in the economy, it is very important. And I think that is where we should now focus on. If there is a company which seems not to be looking at the economic empowerment of the people who are its base or clientele, then even in the African Charter, there's a very clear definition that every company operating in any country must have the people at heart. But if they are going to support only a regime so that they are able to sustain their profits, then we are on dangerous ground.
So you think it's going to be effective?
So I think it is going to be effective. If you read the African Charter on multinational corporations, it is very clear about how companies should operate, including the ones we have in Kenya who are being accused by NRM to be sabotaging people's progress through their profiteering. They are focusing on profits as opposed to social justice and improving the lifestyle of the people or the livelihood of the people.
I guess I think what we need to get clear here is the kind of politics that we are practicing in Kenya. This is what is bringing threats to security. The politics we are playing is not issue-based. We've made our politics a zero-sum game. Winner gets it all. So everybody is struggling to get into government. And unless we change that mindset and say that we should have an all-inclusive government, whether you are from the opposition or whether you are the government, you are a Kenyan and you have equal rights. This is where the problem is coming in. Because I heard during the campaigns, both NASA and Jubilee were promising people jobs. They were promising people businesses. You are told you failed in the nomination, but don't worry, when we get into government, we're going to give you a job. So what happens to those who lost? I think this is where the problem is.
So then you think we are treading on dangerous grounds as a country?
Dangerous grounds. Unless we address that issue, make people feel that they are part of the larger community that is called Kenya, then every electionary year we're going to have these security issues, we're going to have these issues about the results not being accepted by the losers, because they feel like if we accept and move on, then our people are going to lose out. We must correct that.
And I just if you give me a second, I just want also, related to that is, then how does NRM, unless you are coming to that later, and how does NRM achieve its mandate or its objective of making those corporations that it feels are suppressing the people at the altar of profiteering? How do they achieve that? I think one of them, of course, what NASA has said, what NRM has said is that, we will boycott. And it is very effective. Some people are saying, it won't work here. It will work here. Why? How will it work? I mean, somebody like Martin Luther King had, or rather through his pronouncements, had told his people, if this and this and this corporation is not operating and is not respecting your person as an African, please do this. And it worked very well.
And you think Kenyans are ready for that?
And I think Kenyans are now tending towards that. And the reason I say that is very clear. If a whole country can be asked to stop going to vote, and they do, then they are ready for that.
All right, but there are parts in the country where people are voting. But let's take a look at one of